Gunter mentioned I'm the Executive Director of COVESA, formerly Geneva Alliance. Those of you who know COVESA or don't know COVESA, we are the Connected Vehicle Systems Alliance. We used to be very involved in the Geneva days in vehicle infotainment and sort of declared victory in our first mission to move into open source Linux-based platform for IVI, and about 2016, 2017, we began a transition into connected vehicle and vehicle-to-cloud connectivity, which is sort of our focus these days. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the relationship that has been building and building and building between COVESA and AUTOSAR over the last couple of years, and I'm happy to have Michael up here with me. And so Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll hop into the presentation.
Thank you very much, Steve. As you have been, some things, okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So as you have been mentioning, we have some years of contact. I recall, I think it was 2017, we met first in Detroit, initial exchange between AUTOSAR and back then Geneva. So in the meantime, we have always stayed in contact, and we have also, with the emerge of the software-defined vehicle, we see that there are a lot of contact points between organizations that are very important in the future. So we started last year very concrete discussions on collaboration with COVESA and AUTOSAR, and this year we wanted to give you an update on that. So of course jointly, because we're jointly working on that to make it a success. So it would be great if Steve can now give us an overview of the agenda, and then we will tag team, hopefully in a very entertaining way, along you through that topic.
Yeah, so some of you who've been around AUTOSAR for a while know that roughly October of last year we made a joint statement, not an official press release or anything like that, but a statement that we intended to collaborate specifically on this concept of a vehicle API concept. And so today we wanted to give as Michael said, we wanted to give an update and not assume that everybody knows exactly what that concept means and where it's headed. And so we wanted to start with the why. Why are we considering a vehicle API together as opposed to just AUTOSAR doing their thing, COVESA doing our thing, and maybe somewhere down the path we would meet and sort of collide. But we wanted to talk about the why, then the what. What is it what is this vehicle API? What are the component pieces and parts? What are the documents that need to be presented and created? What are the reference implementations that perhaps need to be created? And then it's always about the how. The lawyers always win, right? So it's not like that Michael and I can sit down over a nice Kolsch or something like that and say, hey, let's just do this together, right? We get the legal teams involved. How can these two organizations, which by the way are very different in our IP management and the way we attack technology development, what can we actually do? Can we find a framework that actually allows us to do the things that we want to do together technically? And it's not just about technology production. I mean, everybody in this room knows that technology is wonderful, but it needs a business context and it needs a reason that the industry is pulling that technology. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, is why do we need this? Why does the industry need this? And how can we make this happen? And then hopefully we will have answered all of your questions by the end and we can go have lunch. So with that, I'll let Michael, no, this is mine, I guess.
Yes, this is yours.
This is mine. We're going to be bouncing back and forth. So those of you, again, who know COVESA know that roughly about 4 years ago, we began working with W3C on two specifications, one that they primarily owned around interfacing to vehicle data from the web, called the VISS, Vehicle Interface Service Specification. And then we at the same time, COVESA at the same time, began working on the vehicle signal specification, which was, and still is today, a very simple and common way of describing vehicle data in the vehicle, on the edge, and in the cloud. And what does that give us? What does that enable the organizations in the automotive ecosystem and beyond automotive to be able to do? Well, it allows us to have a commonized data model, commonized data catalogs, and the ability to write APIs to that common model that serve a whole host of applications, ranging from delivering in-vehicle services by OEMs and suppliers to being able to do the analytics in the cloud based on common data across OEMs or across brands within a single OEM. There's a lot of things we can do with this. We can serve services to smart cities. The gentleman this morning, Dr. Chin, talked about V2X, or vehicle-to-vehicle, or vehicle-to-interface, or infrastructure activities. If we have a single language of describing vehicle data, it opens the world to a lot of enabling technologies, and it frees organizations to identify new services that have never been thought of before. We're not going to go out there and create every use case for every in-vehicle service that needs to be built. VSS is an enabling technology that allows those services to be discovered and then developed and delivered into the vehicle. So that's what COVESA is largely doing. We're doing other things, but we right now are I think, succeeding in the growing adoption of VSS, not only in OEMs and suppliers, but also in fleet management companies, AWS FleetWise, Geotab, and more we're having industries like insurance, IoT, smart cities, home automation come to us and say, we need vehicle data in order to do what we want to do in our industry, EV charging, for example. And so, so VSS is enabling us to be able to not only meet the needs of the automotive industry, but also industries around the automotive space where vehicles find themselves in more and more.
Yeah. And of course, at the other side, we from AutoSAR, and most of you know that we have a big focus on the in-vehicle software and the in-vehicle communication. And this is really our strength, where we're coming from the history with our exchange format, with the system documents around the system template, with all of the exchange formats for the applications and so on and so forth. And it's very about the interior of the vehicle. So what we wanted to know is, how do we hook up the vehicle, which is described by AutoSAR means, to the cloud? And this is where our interest is coming into, because we are not so much interested to define each and every service that will be utilized within the cloud, but we are very interested in enable those services by translating the information coming from the cloud to the vehicle, and also translating back what is available in the vehicle that is necessary to be read out, to be provided to cloud services, and how would we map those, how would we link those, how would we translate those, how would we gateway those. And this is, I think, where the collaboration started, right? So somebody coming from the north, somebody coming from the south, and trying to figure out if there are border conflicts or whether we can mutually work on a joint concept, telling the communities, and also joint specifications and implementation, showing the community that it works to combine such standards, one focusing more on the external communication and the description of the services and the description of the functions, and one more on the infrastructure, how the car is built. And this is basically on the next slide, where we are then have understood with what I described, when you have seen this picture most likely in the past in several conferences, is that this is our core scope from AutoSAR, which I have entangled here. And the core scope from COVESA is the one that Steve has mentioned. And this is also how the concrete collaboration talks have started, because we have shown the picture, and then we've asked ourselves, are we competing, or are we looking at the topic from a different angle? And luckily, we are looking at the topic from a different angle. So this is where already Steve has mentioned, where we made this announcement that we have a strategic interest between the two organizations to collaborate, right? So this was basically the announcement, now more in a bullet form, not in the long text, that you have received. So the objective of this collaboration is, as mentioned before, to exchange vehicle data that is described by VSSS into the AutoSAR platforms and into the AutoSAR infrastructure within the car. So with COVESA focusing more on the vehicle data, the services and the cloud interface, and AUTOSAR more focusing on the overall system architecture, how that translates to it, and the in-vehicle network. So we started this collaboration. We had also several technical groups for that kind of collaboration that were looking into what would be necessary. And yeah, this is, I think, where Steve will basically say now something about the what. So what will be necessary to enable this bridge from the cloud into the vehicle? And this is where I hand back to you.
Yeah. So I mean, the overall vision here is, wouldn't it be nice to have open standards that pave the path from ECU level information all the way into the cloud, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful to have open standards to do all that and make those open standards available to the industry? And so what we began to think about is, well, how do we build this? How do we take the concepts that AUTOSAR is thinking about, the concepts that COVESA is thinking about, and how do we build this into a technical project? And so what has happened over the course of the last few months is that representatives from the AUTOSAR Workgroup Cloud and the COVESA Data Expert Group have collaborated on a technical charter that describes at least their view, their collective view, of what an API, a vehicle API project would need to do. Pulled directly from that charter, I'll just read it. The primary scope of this activity is the definition and specification of a joint API, vehicle API, including architecture that will expose vehicle data as defined and described by the COVESA VSS. In a second stage, focus may be extended also to cover methods and functions. The project may also commission implementation, proofs of concept of a vehicle API. That charter document has been reviewed initially by the COVESA board as well as the AUTOSAR steering committee, and it is not yet approved, but is very close. And we are waiting for the next discussion, which is how we operate together, what legal framework we need to put into place in order to get that technical charter fully baked. This is another extract from the technical document. This is a list of intended specifications, and we did a bit of decomposition of the architecture and have identified specific components, and I'll have a picture of that. Michael will present a picture of that shortly, but these are some of the specifications that we believe need to be developed jointly between our organizations. Of course, we'd need an API core specification. We would need transport specification, initially with MQTT, but perhaps with other transport protocols in the future. A network adapter interface of an external connection handler. If you think about external being, AUTOSAR thinks of things internally, and there needs to be an external handler of the VSS data, for example. And then a vehicle API data mapper and VSS binding configuration specification. And so these are some of the documents that need to be created, need to be thought through, need to be contemplated and documented in order for this project to be successful. And then you can imagine that once you build a specification, you'd want to be able to code it, right? We want reference implementations of these. And so there's almost a one-to-one relationship between the specifications built and the expected reference implementations noted here. And so the other thing that we would say is that we would definitely want to have a simulator or emulator tool at the bottom there that would enable us to work on this, outside of a vehicle, but in a simulation and emulation mode. So I'll hand this over to Michael to explain the picture, which is a little bit about what I just said.
Yeah, so what's very important in the picture is, so this box in the middle is the project scope. So this is really where we want to collaborate. So on the top you see, for example, the VSS, right? So this is what COVESA brings in the game. In the bottom you see our AUTOSAR COM layer or our AUTOSAR system extracts as the counterpart. And in between, this is our architecture where we are starting from. This is the architecture which has been elaborated in the technical discussion. Doesn't mean it will be 100% like this, but this is our first depiction, is basically that we have a vehicle API client library, one binder, for example, being VSS, but there might maybe be the necessity to also work with other vehicle API-related formats also in the future, and also data sets, I would say. So this would basically then make this agnostic interface. Then of course we need a way to transport that, to transfer that into a AUTOSAR binder, I would say, right? And this is basically then more the bottom part. And this is also what you saw previously on the specification. As I mentioned, this is the current draft. It's not 100% that will be exactly like that, and this will be the project names you will see when we have the open project, but this is how the overall concept is depicted.
Right.
Yeah, and now I think we're entering the how.
Yeah. Have fun.
Yes. As Steve had mentioned, the how is very interesting because I have a technical degree. I'm a Master of Science. I love technique. And in the meantime, I might be also a little bit lawyer, at least part-time lawyer. It feels like that. So as you know, we have announced the opening strategy of AUTOSAR also to enable collaborations like that with COVESA. So we're not limiting this opening strategy to COVESA, of course. It's a means to collaborate in the software-defined vehicle ecosystem overall, and there are recent decisions that support this collaboration. And this is also a slide that I've shown 2 weeks ago in Porto at the COVESA All Members meeting, so where I was also glad to speak about the same slides as today about our collaboration status. And one thing that is important that we can communicate is that we have now decided that we want to be able to start open source projects that are very close to AUTOSAR in the AUTOSAR environment. This is not intended to be a competition to Eclipse, which we also have a talk later on, or to Linux Foundation or to other foundations, but it's really intended to have open projects there that have a very close relationship to AUTOSAR. So it's not like the next open source foundation or whatsoever, but really with the intention to have these close projects like the collaboration projects hosted in there. And those projects will be, of course, they will be governed by open source principles. Like, for example, a charter document, as Steve has said, a technical charter would be a base also for this open project vehicle API, which we envision with COVESA, and also, of course, open licenses, and also coding state-of-the-art CLAs and agreements to enable AUTOSAR partners, COVESA members, and third party to collaborate in such an open project. So what is very important, open projects we can do only for new stuff. So we cannot just say, okay, let's do an open source implementation of an MCAL driver, because this is a different legal framework, right? So this is not what is possible with that. It's really about new stuff, about gluing things between A and B is what we are tackling there to have this in this open source projects. The second thing is also we want to, as we have announced in the opening strategy, we want to reduce the hurdle for small, medium enterprises and so on to utilize AUTOSAR, especially in some corner cases where they are only needing a very small fraction of the IP. And this is where we were thinking about concepts, how to do that. And one aspect here was that we want to introduce associate partner light agreement, where we are basically have a very low entrance level in the sense that there's no partnership fee, but it's also a very little piece which you will get. It's like 2% of the AUTOSAR specifications, and that will be basically mainly for protocol level on the bus, so to be compatible on the bus level and to enable also REST bus simulation, etc., being developed. And this, in the future, if there's some AUTOSAR IP relevant that is also in the collaboration with COVESA, it could be one option to move then additional topics into this associate partner light agreement. But again, this will not enable open source projects, but community source projects. So we still have a gatekeeper at the entrance that has to make sure you're AUTOSAR partner. So in this case, associate partner light with a low entrance hurdle. And this is how we want to and are able to support the collaboration with COVESA and also with others in the future, and what and when, or on the next steps, we will conclude this at the end of the presentation. So what's the next steps on the opening strategy? So the working model, I mean, this is something which we have elaborated as a draft, as you can see, between the AUTOSAR parties. So maybe, Steve, maybe you can say a little bit about the COVESA side here.
Yeah,
then I do the AUTOSAR part.
Yeah, happy to. So I think that, again, collaborative activity, COVESA has a personality. That personality is open. That personality is based on open source principles, open source licenses. That's our history. That's what we do today. And so we look at this joint activity as really kind of doing the things that we've been doing before, where we worked with VSS in an open context. But in the context of the AUTOSAR COVESA activity, we would be able to contribute our information, our thoughts, our potentially code into this AUTOSAR facilitated project, and we would push information in, but we'd actually also pull information out of that project that would go back and improve the VSS standard. So we think that through the process of doing this API project together with AUTOSAR, we will learn a lot about things that are missing in VSS that need to be updated. So this project will be an opportunity for COVESA members to push information in as well as pull information out in order to improve the VSS standard.
Yeah, and the use case at AUTOSAR side is very similar. As I mentioned, we want to be able to hook up with the cloud in a very smooth and seamless way. So we also want to understand for the collaboration, which pieces of IP would be necessary for weekly API, to maybe considering similar things like with the associate partner Lite. But also, of course, we want to jointly promote the results of these projects. We also expect that we have feedback that we can also use to improve our standards with respect to the interfacing of AUTOSAR. And last but not least, of course, if there is the need to have, because of the legal requirements again, to have a thin piece of software layer that is not allowed to be open source because of the history of the contracts of AUTOSAR, we can still create something within the AUTOSAR partner framework with a defined API to have a small abstraction layer. So this is also something that could be done in the collaboration as a, let's say, abstraction towards open source. I don't know how I want to call it. Don't have better words for that. But this is basically one of the fourth aspect here. And in the middle, in our collaboration part, right, we have then the open work together, right, with third parties. So it's not that it's then, as it's governed by open source principles, like I said, charter, license, and the according CLAs, it is also open for others to join in. Yeah, and this is also from me. So Steve already showed you what the technical work group was thinking about. So I gave you now an update on what decisions have been taken that could enable such a collaboration from a legal framework. And it's a preliminary assessment of these 9 topics with this legal framework I've depicted before. We would be able to start 5 of them with this framework which I've told you. The other 4 are basically needing further legal clarifications, and mainly on the interfacing part to AUTOSAR. So this is basically showing that it's a correct point in time now, and I think this is also where we go to the call to action. So it's a correct point in time now to think about revisiting the charter document and agreeing on the charter document, right? Mm-hmm. And from a strategy perspective, there's a strong interest from COVESA, a strong interest from AUTOSAR to make this work. So we have all of the legal prerequisites are known to us now. So as I mentioned before, here I'm talking about decisions which have not been implemented yet. So these contracts, they now exist as a draft. They need to go through legal reviews and so on and so forth. So you know that. But there is the decision there that this is going to happen. So the legal contract is in, as I said, in in the review at the core partners and so on and so forth. So this we have now, so we know basically what we have to do. So next steps, obviously, get those finalized and signed. And next, as I mentioned, we need to update the charter document with the experiences, because we have also continued discussions in COVESA and AUTOSAR with experiences of the last months. And then, what's the last topic to do?
That's it. Yeah, and I think that just to emphasize something here, we don't want to get up here and talk about legal contracts and legal documents. I mean, it'll bore everybody to tears, and it's like the really exciting thing about this project is the potential for the technology that's going to be developed in an open way and delivered openly to the industry. And so that's really the message we want you to walk away from here. This is, trust us. We'll get the legal things in place, right? And it'll be solid. I guarantee you, with the AUTOSAR lawyers involved, it'll be solid. It'll be airtight. I'm telling you. But the exciting thing here is as Michael said, we can, with the things that the technical charter defines as starting points for this interaction, we can get started almost immediately once we get the legal hurdles cleared and able to get going. And so that's the really exciting part. The other exciting part for me is that it's an opportunity for your organizations, whether you're partners of AUTOSAR or whether you're members of COVESA or whether you're not, to engage in this open activity and to actively contribute and actively influence where that project is going in terms of technology development and freely adopt it under an open source license. And so that's the exciting thing to me. That I see where this is going. So with that, I think we're done, at least for now. But are there any questions that anybody has that you'd like to ask us?